I'm working on a theory about this. I've thought about it for a long time. Why is it that when we do hard things together, collectively suffer? What is it about that is so magnetic and adhesive?
I'm Joe Seaman, and welcome to Raven Conversations. And today I'm joined by Major retired Brian Nelson. If you know Brian, he's a fantastic talker, motivational speaker. Also the founder, creator of Unleashed at the Stadium Bowl, which we will definitely get into. Longtime military intelligence officer in the Guard, and he's here to share his Guard story and share kind of what it is, and some of the stuff he's done since leaving the Guard. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Joe, thank you. And I must say I was flattered when you reached out. I unexpectedly, then it made me think. Well, now, you've called me sir.
I know,
right?
For so long,
and you outrank me, right?
Know.
And it's like,
and I still call you sir. That's what's it's just how time works,
right? Yeah, we're institutionalized, right? As career soldiers. But I think it's. Well, I'd said in the text that I think you've really found your stride in narrative and telling our story, and it's way more important than actually, since I've left the military, I see the telling of the Guard story way more important. Narrative is the delivery system of information for our species.
Yeah.
Right. That is how we communicate. That's how we share knowledge. Yeah. And you have from the magazine, which you started back up. That is at least 10 years ago, probably. 9 or 10 years ago, to the podcast, to the office space that we're in right now, all of it. It's like, Joe, you've made the PAO. What's the right? If I can find the right Army or the military language, it's a battle enhancement, right?
Yeah.
You're combat multiplier, right? You have made what our senior leaders are doing. Easier.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And so since we're talking about the Guard story and the narrative, kind of your intro and background in your Guard story.
Sure. Great. So, like probably so many of folks that enlist in the military, I enlisted after a disastrous year at a community college. We call it a junior college where I grew up in Central California. I got an F in bookkeeping of all classes, right? I started with accounting. I dropped that because they wanted me to do homework, and then someone had said, "Hey, take bookkeeping, so you'll learn." I was like, "Okay." I took that, and it was way too easy, so I quit going. And I thought the instructor would drop me, and he didn't. He failed me, and it was the first time I'd failed. So I had this. I needed to make a change. I tongue-in-cheek say I'm Jeff Spicoli, or I was Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times. And I needed to get the heck out of town, so I joined the Army without telling a single friend. No, I did Blue Falcon, one buddy, right, and drug him along with me. But everybody else, we just joined. And I came up here, and I have to tell that coming in the military before the Guard. And I changed jobs. I was a combat arms tank crewman. But the Army gave me the D lab when I was at basic, right? So I knew I could go to Monterey and learn language if I had ever wanted it. So I wanted to go to University of California, but I didn't have enough foreign language in high school because I dropped out. I dropped the foreign language. Yeah. Anyways, so I decided to change. I do this bear extension. I go down to Monterey, learn Russian, go overseas to Germany. With my then newlywed wife, Kelly. We come back here. I re-enlisted to come back here in like 96. Never planned on staying, right? The Army was a means to an end. Get college money, go to school, try to get an education. And I remember Kelly telling me one time, this is when we were living in Wiesbaden, and I'd come back from a field problem. This is before the wars, right? So the FTXs were the big thing. But I drug my stuff up and threw it in our stairwell housing, and it makes a big clamor in the stairwells. It's super, super loud. But I said something, and I was like complaining about what we had just done, but I'm sure I was complaining while smiling, right? And Kelly, she says, "What are you going to do when you leave the Army?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Anything, right?" And she goes, "You love this." And I was like, "You're out of your mind. I don't love this," right? Anyways, so we come back to Washington, to Fort Lewis, and I had made the cutoff for E6, so I had to go to. I re-enlisted just long enough to get back to Fort Lewis. So I had like 2 years, and I went to BNOC or whatever. I don't even know what they call it anymore, but the school to make E6. And as I was coming back, we worked at a SIG and shop on JBLM. I was in the 502nd MI battalion, but we would see Army Reservists and Army National Guard soldiers coming into the skiff on the weekends, and I didn't know who they were, and I thought, that they were just clowns, right? You have this active duty bias. So, anyways, I'm about a year from separating, and I thought I should probably stay on the team in some way. And I just looked at it like I wasn't going to maintain the language on my own. I knew that, and I thought, well, why don't I join the Guard or the Reserve? So I went shopping, and I ended up coming right across over here, and where the Bravo Company 341st was where now the JFHQ orderly room is. And so I went in there, and this guy, Sergeant Allure, was the readiness NCO, and he's got behind him, where you're sitting right now, was the MTO, the line of block chart for the organization. And I look up at it. I mean, I can read that. And there's a vacancy, right, I was a 98 Charlie, which is now the 35 November. Yeah. I was 98 Charlie, Russian. And there was like a vacancy right there, and I see it. And so John, and I fill out this little data sheet, right, to give to, and I wasn't like a walking re-enlistment photo, but I was a pretty good troop, right? Language scores were good, PT score was good, right? And he starts looking at me like sizing me up, and I'm thinking, dude, you're the Guard, right? Like in my head. He's like, all right, well, okay, I think we got room for you. And I'm like, yeah, I can see but he says, here's how it works. If you do good things for us, we'll do good things for you. If you do great things for us, we'll do great things for you. But if you're a turd, I will harangue you until you're out of my organization. And I remember like shocked. In some ways, I was a little offended. Yeah. But then at the same time, I was like, bro, if active duty was like this, I'd never leave. Like that's a great way to describe an organization I want to be a part. So anyways, I was like, oh, hey, dude. Because I had, once I enlisted in the Army and...
Now, please tell me you said dude.
I think I might have said sergeant, right? I probably did say dude because it just comes right out. They never wiped it out of me. But I had, after picking up other people's cigarette butts, right, as a private, I was like, dude, if this is what life is like without an education, I better get busy, right? Yeah. So I went to school at night for really the next decade, or 8 or so years. And I ended up finishing my undergraduate. And when I met John Allure, when I was, a year from ETS, I was halfway through grad school. And so I asked him, I'm like, hey, man, I'm halfway through grad school. Is there a way I can get a commission? Or, I don't want to go join ROTC. I was about 27, 28 at the time. I didn't want to go back and be with a bunch of younger kids, right? And so he's like, hey, there's this OCS program. And so I went over. Do you remember Colonel Durman? Mm-hmm. So Captain Bob Durman was the ADOS OIC of the WAMA OCS program. And so anyways, I went over there, I had to take an OSB test and take something else, and I had to talk to my commander. But I was able to go the last year that I was active duty. I did OCS 1 weekend a month over here at Camp Murray. Yeah. And interesting. So here's something that's kind of interesting. So Tony Liegi did that. Do you remember, I doubt you know, her name was Cindy Melanzi. Did you ever remember that guy? Okay. So she went to Texas, but, and Jack Mashallo. Yep. So I'll fast forward real quick. Did OCS while I was enlisted, got out in April, joined I was in the Guard then, and I was commissioned in July, went off to OBC. So I really joined the Guard in spring of 97. John Allure got me on ADOS working over at recruiting for Mike Johnson, who was a major at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I said, hey, let me help out with this OCS program. Long story short, I go over, I go back to my old unit, hop on the nascent email, right? This is 97. And I'm like, dude, to my buddy who was the training NCO at my old unit, I'm like, let me hop on. And so I did kind of like a select all command groups of, from the 08 right on freaking down. And I'm like, hey guys, my name is Lieutenant Nelson, right? It's this Banny Rooster, right? So excited. But I don't think you know about OCS, that you could do this while your soldiers are active duty. Anyways, it turns out, and then I sent off this email to all from like companies on up. And what I didn't realize is they had this thing called the senior guard liaison, right?
Yes.
So this '06 calls me and was unhappy for me to advertise at JPLM. But Jack Mashalo's sergeant major got that and reached out to Jack, and Jack joined OCS. He's like 2 classes behind me.
Very
so
awesome.
it's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a long introduction to kind of like how I came here into the Guard. And I only... So from like 97 up until 03, I was a part-time soldier, and I stayed in the 341st, the Bravo company. We drilled Friday nights and Saturday, so it was great, right? You still had one day off on a drill weekend, but and really enjoyed myself. It was interesting, I think, and I think what some NCOs, if they were like me, I think I turned out to be a better officer than I was an NCO. I needed a little bit more responsibility to not become quite so cynical. Actually, I could solve about 90% of the problems that drove me crazy as an NCO. I could solve them even as a second lieutenant, right? It's just like, hey, sir, let me fix it. Can I run the range, or can I do, and fix it? So I think, I especially in our community, the MI community, we could make a lot of lieutenants out of those group of folks. And I think some of them would be much happier. But after 9/11, I was out in the business community working part-time, or I was working full-time. It was Feral Gas. I was like Hank Hill from whatever cartoon.
King of the Hill.
Yeah, King of the Hill. Yeah. So it's propane and propane accessories, right? But what I realized, and it took me a while for this to dawn on me, was... I was unhappy, like chasing the dollar wasn't fulfilling. I didn't know. It sounds. Here's how little reflection I did at that age. I didn't really know, I think, what really mattered to me. I thought money was going to be. I was way more materialistic in my thinking than meaning, and but what I found was, I missed the Guard. I missed soldiers. I missed being surrounded by soldiers. And so I was fortunate enough in 03 to get hired on an ADOS. It was actually 02 for when the 81st Brigade was going to go do the NTC. And so Colonel Kern hired me, and I was an MI officer in the G1 working for the Guard, like the lowest pond scum, right, of any officer you could be. And when I walked over to the 81st Brigade, to the S1, was a guy named what's his name? Craig Withers. Do you remember him? Real outspoken, gregarious, but sharp, just a real sharp tongue. And I walk over because I was thinking, hey, this is my customer. I should go ask, how he's doing. And I open the door into the S1, and I'm, this is back when we wore our branch on our collars, and he looks at me. He's like, "What in the F-bomb is an MI officer from the G1 doing? How are you going to help me?" And I laughed. I'm like, "I have no idea." Right, so that's why I'm here. Like I don't know, but I'm cheap labor for you, right? So let's figure this out. And anyways, from that I got hired into the AGR system in recruiting, and I ended up spending up until 2015 was when I retired. I deployed with the 341st. We went to, it was 03, I think it was 05 to 07 was what they called it. And so we mobed up in late 05, and we took the headquarters company and part of the SIGINT company, and went to Afghanistan. And I was the 3, and it was I was going at, we got mobed, and I was the B company commander, and I was super excited to go. We were going to take a component of Bravo company, and Woodard, we didn't have a 3, and so basically I got fired and was made the 3. And I remember, like, sir, like, well, one, truth be told, I was terrified. I'd never worked staff. I'd worked staff. My first job in the Army as the S4, right? Yeah. And I'd never been in staff since then. So actually being the 3 was pretty concerning as we were going to war. But I think most of us that have deployed, it's mixed emotions, but it's also professional nirvana. And, it's like, I think many of us, at least I felt this way, is that that might have been the best professionally I've ever performed consistently long term. I mean, I didn't fumble for a year and a half or whatever, like from the train up to the way out, and we do all that, and our family never sees.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like it. So there's a part,
especially even in incel, they don't see any of it.
They don't see any of it, and but it, came back here, and I got a chance to command the battalion for a while. Between I was the XO, but I stepped in as commander for about 6 months and had a great experience there. But it ended up getting passed over in 2014, which was shocking, and I don't. It really hurt my feelings, and so of course, being a toddler emotionally, that hurt came out as anger. I was angry at everybody, and I was probably angry for longer than I should have been. It was about a month, I remember, and I'm like, dude, I was like, I think open enough to like. I've been in this game for a long time, and it's treated me very well. I don't want to leave angry, and I'd seen, we see people retire before us, and I saw people leave angry. A lot of them left angry. And so I started doing a gratitude list. I was like, I need to change my attitude on this. And it was like, but I was so mad, dude, right? So it was like, got my F-bomb education, right? I got a freaking, I met my freaking wife, right? I mean, I was still upset, right? I got a house. I'm good. And then it was like slowing down a little bit, like I got a chance to deploy. I got to go to war, which I think if you're not a soldier, maybe, or military, they may not understand that, but it's like we got in the game. Yeah. And I'm really glad I had the chance to get in the game. But then it was, and this was the total mic drop, was I thought about the deep, meaningful connections that I had, the number of friendships that I had. And Joe, my eyes freaking watered, right? And it was like, I'm I'm Bill Gates wealthy when it comes to friendships.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, in the end, that's what matters. Interesting. There's a book, Friendship. Check this out. What would you, if you at 50, if you could take a measurement to detect well-being and health at 80, what would that measurement be?
That's a good question.
Yeah, you'd think maybe like BMI, right? Blood pressure. Yeah. It's number of friends.
Yeah.
So
does it say probably relationship?
It is. It's so love heals us, right? Like seriously heals us, and so that, like, recognizing that, like, dude, I still, like, when I hear Major retired, there's still a small part of me, right? I didn't make the 05, but it's like it was such a small thing, and the career that we have in the Guard, especially if you're full time, we should be doing cheetah backflips of joy every time we come into it's the greatest job. Everybody wants it. It's like it's like a lifetime appointee, right, to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. We're working with our friends. The job is meaningful. We get compensated well. But anyways, all of that, it was fine. I recognized I'll be okay, right? And then when I actually kind of, as I was really getting close to getting out, and then a year or two after retirement, it was like, man, I'm lucky I didn't get fired, right? Like that's the truth, right? Like I was pushing boundaries often that were probably risky.
And I know you've kind of kept going even in retirement. You don't slow down. Right. So what's kind of post-Guard life been like?
So it takes a minute, I think, for us to figure out kind of what's what. I worked part-time for a tech company that did foreign language study, which is a geek space of mine. I didn't even mention that. Our language immersion and LingFit really had spent a lot of time trying to tweak how we trained language. So I worked for the software company part-time, and then I started recruiting, or I'd done some training. So I was an early adopter, I should say, of the MRT. I was probably I was probably the most senior guy that had gone in 2011 at that point. And I bought into the MRT. And all that came from my study on how we learn for language training was, there's a lot going on cognitively that we can get a handle. We can train it and get a handle on things. So then I did some training, trained organizations, a lot of law enforcement and first responders. And then I did some recruiting. But since then, I didn't mention this at all to you before, but Kelly and I started an animal rescue back in 2004. It's called Kindred Souls Foundation. And we started an event called Unleashed at Stadium Bowl, where we race up and down the stairs at Stadium High School. Did you do officer PT when I was in command?
I've never done it with you, no.
Okay. Yeah, that's how it started. And it was when I was taking command, I remember thinking, what's the one or two things I can focus on to move the ball forward? And what had occurred to me was, as an NCO in a company grade, I never really knew the boss. Like I knew who he or she was, but I didn't know him.
Yeah.
And I thought at battalion, you got to kind of, you got to lead through. It's not a cult of personality. So I thought I need to get to know my officers. We started, we'd run the stairs, then play ultimate or soccer, and then go to Hobnob and eat breakfast. And so it was like 3 to 4 hours, right? Where just us O's hung out. And then like every other month, we'd drag one of the companies down, and then we'd play O versus E soccer, right? It was so joy-filled, like seriously. But so this is a long answer to back. What have I done since then? I've done a few revenue generating things. One, I worked for a part-time for a tech company. Then I had a couple of my own business things, doing some training, then doing some recruiting. And then I actually took a hiatus because this race, I couldn't get the race out of my mind. I didn't understand why it has captured me from the very beginning. And so I needed to really do some deep reflection on what does Unleashed at Stadium Bowl, why does a silly little race, right? Why does it mean so much to me?
Yeah.
And so I did. What I finally have come to realize was that Unleashed at Stadium Bowl distills everything I've been trying to say my whole life. I just didn't have the words, right? It's a 90-minute experience that is I guess the greatest reflection of my leadership and life philosophy that could probably be summed up with, well, we have a tagline: Grit, City Effort plus shared struggle equals kindred connection.
Yeah.
That's the softer way to say, let's go do hard, scary shit together, and we'll learn to love each other.
Yeah.
Like that's it. And so, really, while we're raising, we started in 2011 as a fundraiser for Kindred Souls Foundation. Hence Unleashed in the dog days of summer, right? But we have we say now, we actually advertise, we have a twofold mission. We're trying to build character, connection, and community through shared struggle. And so I deeply believe I want to make Tacoma, greater Tacoma, like the most livable city. And how do we do that? By let's go confront the world together, shoulder to shoulder, and learn how to love each other. Because then we can solve problems. What are we going to do with the port, right? Should it be manufacturing, or should it be flower shops, right? We can't. Yeah. The whole red line Tacoma, they're like, we can't solve problems. We can't see each other. And I think it's the quickest way to crack the ego wide open and see who's really there is to do hard, scary things together, is to collectively suffer. And when we see each other that way, well, I believe, I've come to believe, I choose to believe. Like, what is it that you see? I believe we see the divine spark in one another. And it's so, I'll use language that guys usually don't. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful that we can't unsee it. And then in the middle of it, we live up to each other. We don't live down, right? We are modeling courageous, appropriate, heroic behavior to one another. And so we all grow, and we all become stronger, better. And then it's so amazing. Like when somebody comes across a finish line, do you think as they're running, they're like 6 steps, 5 steps, 4 steps, then I'm gonna shoot my arms up? No, of course not. No. Right? You just, as soon as you come across it, you throw your arms in the air and someone hugs you. And
So I remember my first marathon, right?
Yes,
what you're saying is exactly what I did. I remember it was probably mile 21 to 25 was the worst. Right? And it's the worst. It is the
it's
absolute
not a
worst
wall, it's a city block that you run into.
You feel like every step after 20 miles is 1,000 pounds on your feet. And then you hit mile 26 and you realize like the finish line is right there. And what's the first thing I did? So I was in the middle of doing the 22 push-up for the 22.
Yes.
And I remember I FaceTimed Colonel Angie Gentry because she was my battalion commander at the time, crossed the finish line and knocked out 22 push-ups literally within a second of finishing. That is exactly what you're saying.
That's it. It's the most natural expression of joy, right, that there is, and it's well-earned joy. In fact, what I tell our volunteers every year is we set the conditions for people to go all in, and most people don't know what it feels like to go all in, right? But when you do, and you come out the other end, that's that joy we witness people develop and grow right in front of you, and that it's so beautiful, right? And so I think it does. I had a step. Go ahead.
And obviously there was some struggles to get there, right? I mean, the race hasn't always been
right.
I mean, there's been some struggles. Do you want to highlight some of those kind of personal struggles you had to work through?
Well, I guess some of the first ones were I didn't realize to the extent that the first year we did it, that every component of my life, from the YMCA, that's a group of people I know that don't know the people at Camp Murray, that don't know, right? But every component of my life, everybody knew I was putting this race together. And it was hard. Like, if I knew how hard it was before I'd started, I probably would have never started, right? The typical thing of life, right? So you just got to just do it. But I remember feeling so exposed, naked before the gods. And I remember one day in particular, this is actually the first year when I felt like quitting because we weren't going to get a sponsor. There was I'm assuming a lot of risk on the animal rescue, right, to put this thing together. And I wasn't getting anywhere. And so I thought, I'd gone through MRT, so play to your strengths, use your strengths. And I'm like, well, I can talk to people. And I went out and just started talking to people, handing little flyers out, asking people to come to the race, which kind of filled my cup enough, right? Doing my strengths that I could go address some of the scarier things, like how am I going to pay for this thing and not have my wife leave me, right? But then we've had over the years we've had such bad forest fires that nobody wants to go. The public health is telling you not to run outside, and you're like, hey, I got to race. It's just a little bit, right? You'll be okay. COVID obviously shut us down. That was our 10th year anniversary too, and we were going to do a 10-lap race for that year. But I think the struggles aren't nearly as powerful I now feel like on race day, the best way to describe it is I feel like I'm inviting everybody to my birthday party, right? And that's and truthfully, if I did have a birthday party, it would probably be something like Unleashed. Let's go do something hard, and then we'd then play ball. Probably then go eat, right? And it's enough, and I'm so blessed to have this in my life. It fuels me for the next 11 months, right? Like it really. I feel so fortunate to have something that means so much to me. And again, it's like a silly little race, but it's not, right? Because I guess in some ways, if this is another thing that came out of this year of introspection. I was talking to my little brother for 3 years apart, and he's a naval officer, nuke. He's a genius, 790 math, SAT scores. It's my kid brother, right? He's so much better than him. And I said, hey, dude, I finally figured something out about this race. He's like, what? I go, dude, if somebody put a gun to my head and said, why are you doing Unleashed? And I was like pushed back, totally afraid, like the most honest thing. It would have been, I don't want anybody to feel alone. I want them to feel like they're on the team. Yeah. I want them to belong. And my brother was like, yeah, bro, because I got kicked out of the house when I was 16. And different story, but I wasn't the best little child, but it was a pretty rough place to grow up as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think when I say that it's a distillation of everything that I believe in, what I think I found subconsciously in sports and subconsciously in the Army is I found belonging. I found a family. You and I were talking before the air, right? I found an additional. Matt Crotty and I've talked about this on deployments, and when we might deploy and spouses are like, hey, I'm not sure what a non-serving spouse may not quite understand is I actually have another family.
Yeah.
Right. And it's difficult, right, to sometimes negotiate between those two families, right? But really, all of that is the Guard saved my life, the Army saved, the military saved me, and so, like, it's a rather ham-fisted way to do it. But that what I didn't even know I was trying to do, but it's like, I know this heals me. I know it worked for me, and it'll probably work for you if you just come out and try.
Yeah.
Right. So and it took me 10 years. Actually, we just finished year 14. It probably took me 12 years of doing Unleashed before I finally really understood why I was doing it.
Yeah.
In the first few years, I'd come in and I'd probably talk to you, bro. All the cool kids are doing on the stairs, right? It was bombast and it was hyperbole, and hey, some of that is effective, but it wasn't. It certainly wasn't the real truth. The real truth down there is like, hey, man, I just want to build community.
Yeah.
Right. I just want people to feel better. Yeah. Not alone.
And you were saying earlier, it almost saved you, not just emotionally, mentally, spiritually, but even physically and health wise, it saved you too. You gave up tobacco.
Yeah. Yeah. And boy, yeah, probably since I was about 13 or 14. And we talk about, I've thought about this a lot. I worked over in the J9. I missed that too, or the JSS. So for a couple of years, at the end of my Army career here, we did a lot of the suicide prevention and all of the kind of the DSHS, right, human services that the Guard does. And I was in on that. But I was still using tobacco. Here's what I think, that a lot of us struggle, right? PTSD is real, or PTS. I don't think it's a disorder, right? It's just a reaction to stress or trauma. But what I began to think after my own experience and kind of looking around at others is that many of us, the aberrant behaviors that happen post deployment, or post, from DV to speeding on motorcycles to drug and alcohol abuse, all of that, just call it aberrant behavior, didn't stem as much from the actual combat, but maybe we came from broken homes and bad situations, which drew us to the military in the first place. Again, subconsciously, we're looking for law, for order, for looking for rules that don't change. Somewhere we can belong, but we were bruised, right? We were bruised, and then we go into combat, and like an old injury, right? It comes back, and so this is a long way to what tobacco had been for me was, which I didn't know really at the time, but it had become my pacifier as a young kid, like teenager, and so then I used tobacco throughout up until 2020, and I finally had decided to give up the tobacco. Had the courage to you quit and start and quit and start and quit and start. Right? Everybody does that, I think. But I stopped, and then I was using nicotine replacement, like chewing gum and nic pouches. But it was facilitated by that I was trying to, in many ways, giving up tobacco was trying to be more congruent with who I was trying to be as the race director, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. It was like, I'm saying I'm trying to do this, but I'm being disingenuous if I'm using tobacco, right? Because I'm not being that healthy. And so, and then I shared with you that when I finally gave up the nicotine about 4 years later, that was rough. That was really rough. And it to the point that it became obvious that I had probably my whole life been anxious, head on a swivel, and have a tendency to tip towards depression when things get dark. Like we all have those periods, but I had tobacco had been this antidepressant, anti-anxiety, appetite suppressant. It was the wonder drug, right, for me. That when that was stripped away from me, it really left me probably more naked before the gods than I'd ever felt. And so had some pretty long talks with Kelly, right, and really coming to terms with my set point is I run on a little bit higher octane, right? And that is probably low level anxiety always, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can peak, right? But if I didn't have these really hard, what solves all of that, the balm to all of that, is doing hard things with people. Yeah. The friendships that we create, the relationships that we create in the military when we do hard things together, they are the only thing I've come to believe that we've got against the ever-present existential terror of being that is always there, right? It's like, seriously, right?
Yeah.
And the way we cope with that is all sorts of unhealthy coping mechanisms and some decent, not so or more healthy coping mechanisms. But when we feel that connection with another human being, where does the boogeyman go?
Yeah.
Who's under the bed or in the closet when your older brother or your mom or your dad come in the room? They vaporize. Yeah. Right. The connection is the medicine that we need, and it's taken me years of kind of crawling around all over to come to this. This is what I'm supposed to do. Is my job. What I'm trying to do is set the conditions for connection. Yeah. Which I think is from quantum entanglement to nuclear families, to marriage, to families, to groups, to tribes, right? Yeah. That's the whole point, right? Is for us to learn, it's learn to love each other and connect. Yeah. And so that's what I'm doing.
So that kind of goes into a term I've heard many a time, a lot from you over the course of my career, and that was collective suffering, shared experiences through collective suffering. That's how we grow. Right. And I think you've done that with the race, right? It's not just hey, come do this race. It's that guy next to you is, if you're on the last few steps and you can't make it, that guy next to you is going to grab you and help you up those steps and back down. Right. And it's something that I know you're very passionate about is how do we grow together?
Thanks for asking that. So I've kind of got I'm working on a theory about this. I've thought about it for a long time. Why is it that when we do hard things together, collectively suffer? What is it about that is so magnetic and adhesive to our condition? When we can, it's like post-suffering. When one measurement maybe on well-being is when one of those times in your life when you can laugh at yourself harder than anybody can laugh at you. Yeah. Right. Those are those kind of like OCS stories to me, or I didn't do Ranger School, but some of the hard things that we've done in the military, where you're actually more at peace and happier, and your well-being is peaking, even though you wouldn't think it at the time because you're sweaty and soiled and dirty, right? But what we've done is I'll go into it. The difficulty is we have to have our egos up, but because you're a monster, I'm a monster, right? Cain slew Abel. It's both naive and irresponsible to lower our guards all the time, right? We're apex predators, right? Angels and demons in the same person. So we have to keep our egos up, but that doesn't allow us to truly connect like people. They're like protective plugs on an outlet, an electrical outlet, right? So if we want to see who's really there, if we're going to really connect, we have to disarm, right? But most of us aren't going to do that willfully. We'll willfully show up, but the effort, the running of the stairs, the 12-mile ruck march, with a 35-pound load or 40, whatever the load is, that effort strips us involuntarily strips us, right? It's a smelting of the dross, right? The impurities are and no self-respecting piece of ore wants to go into the furnace, right? Like, no, that's going to hurt. Yeah, of course. That's by design, right? But in that stripping, we see, what is it that we see? And I think we see actually two things. I'd said, one, I believe we see the divine spark in one another. And secondly, I think there's a great poem called "If" by Rudyard Kipling. If you haven't read it, it's great. It's like if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. It's in the top 10 best things ever written, right? So, but there's a line in there. It says, if you can force your heart, your nerve, your sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when the only thing left is the will which says to them, hold on, right? When you're just completely depleted, but you still tell yourself to hold on. That's what we see, right? We see the will and we see the divine spark. And when we see that in one another, I think it does two things. It opens our heart. It blasts us with beauty and all that's good in the world, really, like the heroic virtues. And it also encourages. We are compelled to live up to what is being shown right in front of us. Right. It's one of the beauties, I think, of what CrossFit probably does is if you're doing like a WOD that says do 50 squats and then run a quarter mile at 25 squats, most people's fun meter's pegged. Yeah. Right. They're like I want to quit, but I'm not around everybody else because we are vetting ourselves to ourselves, right? And then, and so when we do that together, we finally see each other for the first time, I think. And so when we do a fist bump, a high five, and it's all, we just think of it as a, good job, or, the coach slaps you on the butt, that kind of thing. Yeah. But that fist bump, that high five is way bigger than any of us ever actually think out loud or say out loud, but we behave it. It is, oh, Joe, there you are, bro. I've been looking for you the whole time. Now I trust you, and I will go to the fucking mat for you and with you. I'll go to war with you and for you. I've got your back. That's all said in that, and we know it, right? We know it, and then we're stronger because we're filled that I believe it's agape, right? And so the unconditional love of one another. One could say that it's an adaptive advantage, right, as a species, right? When we were coming out of the ice age and we needed to go from hunting woolly mammoths to persistence hunting game, right? We had to go do those things. We would hunt as a group. We'd go, and then we were protecting the tribe and we were bringing back food to the tribe. And so it was this, it was this joyous occasion, but it fills us. I think it's Kubler-Ross, the grief. So she's the grief gal, the 5 stages of grief. She also wrote something that I think is probably pretty accurate. There's only 2 emotions, kind of like the primary colors. There's fear and love, and everything else is a permutation of one of those, right? So when we do that fist bump, when we do that high five, all the fear is pushed out of us, and it's filled with love. It's filled with agape, and we'll call it camaraderie. We'll call it morale. We'll call it esprit de corps. All that. Yeah. That's all true. I believe below it is love. It's just language we don't generally use. But that's why we can work together in the military. That's why we can look beyond why the military is arguably the most diverse organization in our country, from men, women, to different colors, to sexual orientation, right? None of that matters because we've got the fortune to do hard things to each other or with each other all the time. And we're re-reminded of who's really there, right? We go beyond, because then we're going to get, then we go back to work or whatever. And of course, life creeps back in and we become afraid again and we begin to blame and judge. And and our and we get in our own ways, right? But then we go back, then we go run solo point, right? Or we go cold plunge, or we go do something hard, and we're reminded of who we are.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing you always hear about the guard, and you can probably attest to this, is you can come to drill, and it's like a day doesn't go by that you've seen this person. You can go 15 years down the road and not having talked to somebody, and it's like you just pick up that relationship right away because you have that.
Right. It's like when we see each other, when we see that divinity in one another, and that will, it changes. We can't unsee that. We can't forget that. Right now, we can betray ourselves, and we do, and act like jerks again, right? And not be in line with what we like. Really, you'd think we'd walk around in awe of one another all the time after something like that, because it's like, oh my God, that's beautiful. I think I actually do believe that's what keeps us in the military, in the Guard. It's kind of like, Joe, we'll hear Joe's not happy unless he's complaining. That's a component of it. Do you know what I mean? Like we have to be, there's a level of discomfort. We're beasts of burden. We're happier under a load, right? We conflate pleasure with happiness, and usually the times I've come to believe that we're most happy is far from comfortable. Yeah. Right. It's far from pleasurable.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a lot of times, probably. What are some of those things you miss about serving in the Guard?
It's the people, 100% the people. Well, and what we do matters. It really I had a challenge when I was out in the business community, where it was very transactional, right? Like, I give you this product, you give me money, right? And I'm gonna try and get more money. I'm gonna try and make as much money as I can. But what I do miss, I remember saying this in COVID, early in COVID, that I wish I could get called back up. It's so there's what is it? FM 101-5. The old leadership manual was, what's the definition of leadership? To influence an organization by providing purpose, motivation, and direction. Yeah. Right. So there have been moments in the 9 years since I've retired where my purpose, motivation, and direction haven't been so crystal clear as they are in the Army. And so you miss a little of that. But more than anything, it's I've done marathons. I've swam, ran, and played team sports. I prefer team sports. Yeah. Right. That not everybody's that way, and so what I miss more than anything is being around other people, like-minded people. Like-minded people doing something that matters. It's like we're oxen, right? And I miss having the load, and I guess doing the important work, the state active duties. So I'd asked, it's like, man, I wish I could get called up for COVID, and Kelly got. My wife was like, what do you, she was kind of offended, but I don't think she kind of understood. It's like, I
because you saw something happening.
I want to help.
And you wanted to help.
Right. Yeah. It's like, pick me, coach. Yeah. I'm sitting here on the bench. I'm ready. Call me in.
Ready to come out of retirement.
Exactly.
Put on the rake.
I'll put the cleats back on. Right. Yeah. But yeah, so that's it. It's and so I think that's something that when people are retiring or coming up to it, trying to identify what is really meaningful to you. And that's, I'm very fortunate that we started this animal rescue, and that we stumbled around blindly, and I started this race, right? Like, didn't know what I was doing. And now it feeds me, it just fills my spirit, right? But I think there's so many, there's infinite ways to find purpose, meaning, and direction. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's that piece of advice you give a junior soldier or leader today that's sitting here watching this and thinking, man?
I'd say go all in. Yeah. Like I didn't for the longest time, especially when I was active duty enlisted. I was cynical about the Army, about one, that I was enlisted. All of my peers I was in for 8 years. So at that point, they were in medical school or law school or, doing professionally very well. And what and so I never took it seriously. It was just a means to an end. And even if it's a means to an end, what I would say to any one of our soldiers, one, to the junior leaders, I would say never talk to the soldier right in front of you. You talk just over their head. You talk to their potential.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't see that potential in your soldier, then maybe you're not in the right business, right? But we have to grow our folks. But to those first term soldiers, even second term soldiers, NCOs or officers, is act like you want to become a general. Act like you want to become sergeant major, and make your decisions based on that, because you will, in the end, you'll end up being more effective and happier, because there's a difference between pleasure and happiness, and we're way better off, and we're much better people when we're laying on the grass, sweaty and dirty and exhausted than we are when we haven't gone in, we haven't tried, or we've held ourselves back because I'm too good for that, or whatever kind of BS kind of lies we justify our own behavior. But it is scary. It's scary to try. It takes courage. Yeah. It takes courage to try, and then to look at your peers who are probably complaining and bitching and moaning, and say, "No, I'm gonna act like it matters." Yeah. So that would be. I don't know if that's helpful.
That's perfect. But, yeah. I want to give you a chance to kind of throw some closing comments together. But next year's race, have we picked a date?
Yeah, it's Sunday, August 3rd. And what I hadn't mentioned is so we've done that race for 14 years. But what we started 2 years ago is the Heroes Race. So after the main race, we have teams of 3. Firefighters, cops, and military. The men wear a 40-pound vest. The women wear a 20-pound vest and run the stairs. And it might be the best medicine our community's seen since COVID. To see, like, the implicit message from this experience, Joe, was exhale Tacoma, because the very best that we make as a nation have dedicated their lives to keeping you safe. Our participants, I told the Heroes teams, it takes 22 minutes is the average time to do one lap at our race. I said, guys, I need the men and women that can do sub 22 with a load. And so everybody did that the first year. And the second year, we had a couple people that were slower, but nobody quit. Yeah. And so all of us that have just finished the race are in the food garden, and we're seeing these athletes, these firefighters, these cops, these military, running faster than us with a 40-pound. People, their faces were streaked with tears of joy, right? It was... to renew the pride, trust, and confidence our first responders and our military is meaningful, and we need to do it. And so I would love to get. We had some Guard participation. The Guard's been a part of the race from the very beginning. It's a Guard story in some ways, right? A Guard family started it, right? But I really would love to see greater participation in the Heroes Race, because what we're telling all the athletes out there, all the young men and women, is there's another way to live the athlete's life, right? And if you're a varsity athlete, Angie Gentry, I'm stealing this from her. She says, if you're a varsity athlete, you're going to be a varsity athlete the rest of your life,
that's
right?
True.
And that's more indicative of who you are, like left to your own devices, than your SAT scores or your major in college or anything like that. So we need to. I think it would be wise for us to confront young men and women about, if you're an athlete, athletes need teammates and they need a locker room, and they need a culture that supports that. And the best place that defines that or that encourages that and lives that are 3 places, right? Law enforcement, firefighting, and the military. Yeah. And you will be happier, right? Even though you're going to suffer. So,
Yeah. Anything in closing?
Thank you. I think to the Guard soldiers out there. I mean, I've been out now 9 years, so that's half a career, right? So there are probably maybe only a third of the people that I knew that be proud of what you're doing. It really does matter. It really does. And when people thank you for your service, they mean it. And I would say tell them you're welcome, but remind them that we get an order of magnitude more than we give.
Yeah.
Right. So it's we are our best selves when we have figured out a way to take our talents and point them out in the service of mankind, right? And we get that in the Guard. And so I guess what I would close with this is go all in, in your soldiering life. Ask for hard things. To all the command teams, I would say we don't do PT together. We only take PT tests, and I think that's a tragic failing, because that is one of the easiest ways for us to mimic collective suffering, right? And build the team. And that's the only thing I think that matters in the end is we as leaders, we want our soldiers to want to come back next month. Yeah. So go all in and do hard stuff together.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I appreciate you coming on. I've known you a long time. I'm always excited when you talk. I think you've done a number of TED Talks. Even
Yeah.
I just appreciate you coming on and sharing your message and your story with us, and kind of reconnecting with some of the guardsmen that are here. So
no, that's great.
We can definitely put the information for Unleashed in the notes in the video with a link so that folks know where to go.
Thank you.
If you like the video, give it a like. If you want to know more, ask some comments. We can definitely reach back out. He can answer some questions. Subscribe for future videos. Brian, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks, bro.